Grubhub and Amazon deepen their ties. The end is nigh for cookies, says Google. And will NFCs replace QR codes in our restaurants? That's all ahead on this week's Digital Restaurant. The digital restaurant works like this. We're going to ask each other 5 questions about headlines that affect the worlds of restaurants, off-premise, and technology, but in some way tie back to our book series, Delivering the Digital Restaurant. Are you ready? Let's go. Good morning, Meredith. How are you doing today?
Very good, Carl. How are you?
I'm okay. As you know, I had surgery a week ago, so I'm hobbling around. So I'm very grateful for the doctors and nurses that looked after me a week or so back because they took good care of me.
As are we, Carl. Glad you're back.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone that has reached out over the course of the last week just to check in on me. Sam Stanovich, very kind. He sent me a nice little note. Had other friends send me little care packages. I felt very loved. Appreciate you all. Anyway, lots to talk about. Busy news week as always, and I think you have the first question for me.
Sure do. This is exciting. So, Grubhub has opened up a new way of ordering on Amazon. They've long had a partnership, but now it seems even more. So, would love to hear about that.
Yeah, Amazon is now allowing customers to order food from Grubhub directly through Amazon.com and the Amazon app. So the integration is part of their growing partnership, as you say. That's began, I think, in July of 2022. So it hasn't been around for too long. And it started, of course, with a deal offering Amazon Prime members a 12-month free Grubhub Plus subscription. And the new agreement extends that benefit indefinitely, making Grubhub Plus a permanent perk for Prime members. Now, as a result of this change, Amazon has increased its stake in Grubhub from 4% to 7%, with options to acquire up to 18% based on the partnership's success. And of course, it's going to boost, I think, Grubhub's visibility and customer base majorly by Amazon's vast user network. For restaurants, of course, this means more exposure and potential orders, while for Amazon, it enhances their Prime membership value. This really helps because Grubhub's been facing many challenges, I think, recently, lagging behind competitors like DoorDash and Uber. However, it has been making some improvements. It's obviously revamped this Grubhub Plus platform. It's been lowering its service fees. It's been trying to enhance its delivery speed. And I think they have something like 375,000 businesses nationwide on their platform now. The key business benefits are very much about visibility, right? More orders for Grubhub, being able to own a section in the Amazon app ensures continuous customer engagement and awareness. And the Grubhub CEO, Howard Migdal, highlights that as a critical factor for growth. Of course, it's also good for Amazon Prime members because that, as a permanent benefit, really enhances the value of the Prime membership, and that's going to help them attract and retain more subscribers. And that certainly aligns with Amazon's strategy to offer more diverse perks to keep the Prime members engaged. Don't forget, they only recently increased the cost of that service. I guess one of the questions I have is this going to be something that deploys itself further in utilizing Amazon Fleet or Flex drivers to support Amazon and food deliveries in time, where we see perhaps retail items being also upsold alongside food items? That would be some pretty amazing synergies if we can see that happening. But there are some limitations as well, right? I don't know what the latest percentages were, Meredith. Maybe you'll know, but the amount of restaurants on the Grubhub platform relative to the DoorDash and Uber of this world, it's not as much, right? There are certainly fewer restaurants on their platforms as opposed to DoorDash and Uber Eats. And of course, that might be very locally specific. I suspect if you're in Chicago, where Grubhub has a strong foothold, cancel your pass, right? Because in many ways, that's going to be a great way to be able to get a lot of customers coming away because they've got a lot of presence for Chicago restaurants. I'm also curious to see what does this mean for DoorDash and Uber Eats? What are they going to do to strengthen their partnerships, their integrations? Could we see a DoorDash option appear on Walmart.com or an Uber Eats through Target.com at some point in the future? But one thing's for sure, subscription services aren't going away. They certainly are showing this level of value across multiple e-commerce channels. What did you make of this?
Amazon is the everything store, right? And it's hard to be everything without restaurants. So it makes a ton of sense. They've made so many attempts at trying to get into this business, and this seems like a really logical one for them. And of course, for the consumer, as you said, it's a huge win because consumers love easy. And what is easier than I go to Amazon all the time to order things? So while I'm there using all of the exact same tools, I will just order dinner as well. You know me, I immediately signed up, registered my Prime with Grubhub and tied my credit card to it, and there's like 2 or 3 steps, super easy to get it going. But I noticed all of the communication was around free Grubhub, $0 delivery fees, and naturally, I was very curious to see what the deal was with service fees because I think it's disingenuous, frankly, of DashPass and Uber One and everybody to say it's free delivery when it's not free delivery, right? You have a $0 delivery fee, but then you have all these service fees. Interestingly, all of the promotional materials for Amazon and Grubhub said it was a reduced service fee that Prime members were eligible for. But when I went through and checked out, first in the cart, it was an 8% service fee that showed up on what I put in there. But then when I actually got to checkout, it jumped up to 12.4% with no explanation. Literally just one page to the next, it went from 8% to 12.4%. I think that's very disingenuous to call it free when it's not free, first of all. And second of all, in keeping with our last podcast, will be interesting to see what they do in the state of California with these fees.
Well, from that subject on to the next, we noticed on LinkedIn initially, Lisa Miller was putting out some latest results from some of the surveys that she does through her business. And she was asking the question, is delivery in danger? Well, is it, Meredith? Is delivery in danger?
Lisa Miller, for those who are not familiar with her, does consumer insights research, and she's actually been fielding her own surveys and publishing them since the beginning of COVID. And you can go on her website to see what consumers have to say, which I think is super interesting. It's lwmassociates.com, and she's got all kinds of interesting blog posts there. And of course, you can follow her on LinkedIn. She talks about a lot of it. But she's been routinely asking people about delivery and their feelings about delivery, among other topics in the restaurant space. And her thesis out of all of this is that consumers want to experience joy. And when they experience joy, they do more of it. And when they don't, they do less of it. And her thought around delivery is that there is no joy there, and so delivery is likely to be declining. And in fact, in the FSR space, full service restaurant space, she reports that the percentage of consumers in her survey who have ordered over the last 3 months has fallen 10 entire points to 22%. That's like a 30% decline. That's huge in FSR. And I think that is probably indicative of what we're seeing in a lot of the earnings reports for these restaurants. She did not give the same number for QSR. Hopefully, that will be in a coming blog post to Lisa if you're listening. However, she did give some reasons why these numbers might be falling. The first one is that consumers report experiencing an issue, 80% in FSR and 82% in QSR. Meanwhile, they report that delivery fees have gone up too much. 41% of QSR respondents in our survey said the delivery fees specifically, not the price of the food, but the delivery fees specifically have gone up too much. That's up 6 points versus last year. Meanwhile, the quality is getting worse. So 24% of QSR patrons report a quality issue. That is up 7 points versus last year. 24% also in FSR, up 4 points from last year. Temperature issues also abound. So you've got this situation where I'm paying too much for something that isn't that great, and I have an issue most of the time, the vast majority of the time that I do it. So you can see where she's getting to. That doesn't feel like a joyful experience. I would expect that people will do it less and less, free delivery from Amazon notwithstanding.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you heard that, Lisa, right? Meredith wants more data. She'll send you her request by email soon. Hi, Carl here. Just to interrupt the show briefly to remind you that if you have yet to get your copy of either of the Delivering the Digital Restaurant books, now is the time to get one. If you head to thedigital.restaurant, you're going to be able to get the best price available. You can also listen to both books with yours truly talking about them on Audible. You can get a copy off Amazon if you'd prefer to order through them. But if you haven't got the books yet, Get them. They really are going to transform the way in which you look at the restaurant industry and the way in which technology is disrupting it.
Okay, I think we've talked about this one for years now. QR codes, dead again. Also, think it seems like they're constantly dying or dead or being proclaimed dead by the media. It seems that it's happened once again. Is NFCs the solution here?
You know, it's true, Meredith. I think we often find that there's lots of articles about the birth of something, like a new innovative startup doing something really interesting, gets a lot of trade press, and also a lot of trade press goes towards things that are dying, ghost kitchens, virtual brands, all that kind of stuff. We always hear, but actually, in many ways, it's just a point in transition of innovation. And I think what we're sharing here are two articles. The first one was in the Wall Street Journal about QR codes. And of course, QR codes became particularly popular in restaurants for their convenience during the pandemic because it allowed customers to access menus and order without contact. Unfortunately, a lot of them led towards PDF menus, therefore not mobile optimized. And as a result, the whole thing has become something that has faced a bit of a backlash from diners who now find them rather cumbersome and less personal. And the idea of having to squint to read the menus on their phones, or maybe even concerns about privacy and a disruption to the overall ambience of dining in a restaurant. For example, Oz de Soleil left the restaurant without ordering because navigating the QR menu felt like work in the article. Rich Fox from Yes Parade Restaurant Group noted that QR codes reduced check averages by 10% as customers didn't explore all the menu options, leading to lower tips for servers. Again, all of that points to is that the design of the menu as opposed to necessarily the QR code that got them there. But there's also something here which I think is important, and that is the generational differences. The reception of QR codes varies by age. Younger customers at Farm Bar in Chicago appreciate the efficiency of them, while older patrons struggle with the technology. Joshua Hampton was referenced in the article. He's a server at Farm Bar, highlights the challenge of encouraging customers to use their phone to access menus. And you can imagine that, right? I mean, if we were to bring our parents into a restaurant and bring up a QR code, they'd probably find it a little bit more difficult than if you and I had to do it ourselves. So, no huge surprise. But then the second article talks about near field communication, NFC for short, and some reference to it at the National Restaurant Show a few weeks back, where companies like Flash Order are showcasing NFC enabled solutions. Now, what is that? That's where you tap your phone on an NFC reader, which could be a sticker for all intents and purposes, and customers can access a restaurant branded app instantly, therefore bypassing the need to download a full app. And of course, that mirrors the convenience of a digital boarding pass that you might have when you're flying somewhere. So, a number of advantages here. NFC technology provides a streamlined ordering experience without the need for perhaps kiosks. So, if you're someone that's thinking about kiosks, which are all the rage this year, but don't necessarily have the capital to invest in it, maybe this is a solution that could work for you. According to the Flash Order co founder John Lund, NFC mini apps offer that kind of familiar app experience, but are more convenient. Grant Russell from Curate highlighted the cost savings for restaurants because they don't have to spend out on kiosks. And additionally, these NFC mini apps can stay on a customer's phone for 30 days, encouraging them to download the full app later. So I really like the idea of this piece around trying to remove the friction out of it and to be able to help the customer get to the ordering experience faster. And because it's on a mini app type of interface, therefore designed so that you're not having to squint your eyes or find it challenging to use, you're going to have a more optimal menu experience. So yeah, interesting. I don't think QR codes are necessarily dead. I think what we'll find is that they might be used as promotional activation points. I think we're going to see them as a tool for operators to be able to use to help make sure that they're replacing perhaps the physical checklists or training tools within a restaurant. But certainly for the customer, at least, when it comes to ordering interfaces themselves, maybe the NFC solution is the way things are going to head in the years ahead.
Speaking for all glasses wearers, I'm just going to put it out there that squinting at my phone because a QR code took me there versus squinting at my phone because an NFC sticker took me there is not different.
But if you can create one of these mini apps that allows you to be able to get better access to a more,
That sounds awesome. That sounds very exciting for the restaurant. It sounds, fantastic. I'm just saying I'm still gonna be squinting because my phone
yeah.
is the same size.
One of the things that I think strikes me on this is, and we hear this all the time, right? Especially from independents, is do I need an app? And you've got to ask yourself, how many restaurant apps? You and I probably have more than the average person, but do you really expect independent restaurants to have their own app? I
No,
think
and in many ways, I think this is a sign these mini app things is a sign of the death of the app, right?
mm,
It doesn't make sense. It was a construct of an environment when Apple products did not use the internet the way that the internet was designed, and they introduced a new form factor, and so internet and iPhone fought, and so they developed the concept of an app, and they took off. But as we change form factors in our phones, say, as we get more and more toward a vocal chat interface instead of something visual or something touchscreen. As we use smart glasses instead of a phone, as LLMs become our predominant way of searching, as all these things start to change, an app is kind of crazy, I think. It really, as I've said many times, all it is a giant billboard saying, my website doesn't work well on your phone, right? And most consumers, when they want something specific, would rather just go to that website, one off, rather than try to download an app for that specific thing and use it and learn how its novel little layout works because it's so special and great. Like, nobody wants that, right? Except for, as you said, the brands that you go to most often. And you're right. I bet we do have more apps than most people. I would like to hear from everyone. What is the count of restaurant apps? Open your phone. I personally have a restaurant folder. Again, we're super users, right? So I have 11. I counted them yesterday in my restaurant folder that I use on a regular basis. I would like to hear from everyone else. How many do they have?
that's what I'm saying. All right, if the death of the QR code has happened, then what? The end of cookies is nigh, says Google. What is this about, Meredith?
I know when I first read this headline, and I'm sure they did this on purpose, I thought, restaurants aren't going to serve cookies anymore. That sounds terrible. I don't want to live in a world without cookies. But of course, they mean the other kind of cookies, tracking cookies. So, first, just to back way up, what is a cookie? These are the things that the internet uses to stalk you. And this is why when you see a pair of shoes and you do not buy it, that pair of shoes follows you until you finally give in. Marketers, e-commerce marketers in particular, use cookies to determine sources of traffic onto their website using tools like Google Analytics so that they can determine the ROI of any given campaign. And Google, who first announced 4 years ago that they were going to eliminate cookies, says this is the year they're finally doing it. So, certainly anyone who's a sophisticated e-commerce marketer, this could potentially affect, and they might need to think about alternate ways of getting the data. Probably only the most advanced restaurants are really using cookies to try to determine these things. I'm guessing not a lot of independents out there do, but if you do, let me know. I would love to know how you're using them. And as we often say, it brings us right back to the same old, which is first party ordering is great. You'll have that actual behavioral data and you'll see. But in order to get the first party data, you want to know how you got them, right? Which campaigns brought people over to your first party channels? Gonna have to find new ways to do that without cookies.
That sounds kind of sad, but I suspect they'll resurface and they'll call them something other than cookies. There'll be some kind of way in which they'll
Oh,
find a return.
of course. Okay, last question for you, Carl. Cultivated meat. Apparently not something American consumers want? Question mark.
Mm. Well, this is associated to a YouGov survey, Meredith. Cultivated meat, of course, is the nice term for lab grown meat grown in a lab, and so therefore no culling going on. So for those folks that don't like the idea of animals being killed to service their meat, well, this has been a growing area. Now, only 10% of those surveyed in this YouGov poll have said that they're willing to even try it. 60% prefer to avoid it, and two-thirds of that latter group are firmly against even tasting it. So, when given a choice between farm grown and lab grown meat with no difference in taste or cost, 50% say they're going to prefer farm grown, and only 13% choose lab grown, while
Wow. Why do you think
14%
that
reject
is?
both. 14% reject both.
Is
So,
it just because it's novel? Wait a minute. Hold on. I have so many questions. Is it novel? And then let's go back. 14% reject both kinds of meat. Does that mean 14% of Americans are vegetarian?
I think that's probably what it is. Yeah.
That number has gone up.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. Look, I think this is classic change management, right? This obviously is something where something new that perhaps hasn't got the necessary level of education yet, hasn't necessarily got the necessary levels of celebrity endorsement yet, isn't really getting people to even think that this is something that perhaps is good for them or good for the world. Most of it stems from the production process rather than the product's attributes. Consumers are uncomfortable with the idea of meat just being cultivated in a lab. And this aversion is strong because 31% support banning lab grown meat. So
What?
31% support banning it
Banning?
compared to the 36% who oppose such bans. So the rest are undecided. And guess what? In two states, Florida and Alabama, they've actually banned selling and consuming, not just selling, and consuming lab meat.
Like it's a drug?
Like it's a drug, I guess. I don't know whether it's a felony of sorts, but hey, it's kind of interesting. Now, the FDA has approved lab grown chicken from 3 producers last year. Commercial production remains limited, so it's not particularly available for widespread consumption. But notably, high profile chefs like Jose Andres and Dominique Crenn, they've only served lab grown meat for publicity purposes, but they've been talking about it, of course. Now, there are technological challenges that continue to hinder the production of it, especially when it comes to beef and pork. But I don't know, it's interesting. I think there's just a perception thing. There's probably, as they call it, the ick factor, right? Something associated to discomfort and distrust, and maybe just a general barrier to the acceptance, overshadowing the potential benefits that could come from eating it in this way. But I do come back to that piece around education. I think typically consumers are more comfortable with traditional farming methods, and that's just been the norm for generations. And that skepticism and resistance is largely because they don't really know how it's made and they don't know whether it's safe. And perhaps where you've got states like Florida and Alabama showing that they're taking some legislative action to reinforce that public aversion, that's only going to entrench those negative perceptions. So I think really, if you are in this business, you need to invest in educational campaigns. You need more positive messaging and branding associated to it. It needs to be talked about in terms of its safety, its cleanliness, its sustainability benefits. And then it's probably around tasting, right? Do you remember at Food on Demand recently, Meredith, we had meatballs for lunch, and they were vegan meatballs, and both of us said, "Wow, these tasted just like normal meatballs." And
That's
actually,
amazing.
if we weren't told that they were plant-based meatballs, we wouldn't know otherwise. I wonder whether there'll be something similar to the Coke and Pepsi challenge when it comes to cultivating meat further down the line here.
Yeah, well, certainly rebranding it. Cultivated, I mean, it just after so many years of being told that, like, GMOs are bad for us, cultivated sounds like they're doing something weird in a lab, doesn't it? And
It does.
I don't know, consumers are so funny. Yeah, they just need some branding, some celebrity endorsement, it'll all be fine. I'm personally super excited to try it. I haven't yet, have you?
No, I haven't. I definitely will try it. I think there's a lot of good that can come from exploring options like that. But as ever, it's going to be those early adopters that start to get involved in it, and then hopefully a celebrity or two endorses it, and then we'll go forward from there. Okay, well, look, that is it for this week's digital restaurant. I was about to call it the Monday Minute. Do you remember those days when we called this the Monday Minute?
Oh, thank goodness.
As ever, would love to hear from you guys. What do you think about the idea of cultivated meat? Are you going to try it? Are you going to be thinking about developing these kind of mini apps and using near field communications at your restaurant? Please let us know your thoughts. And as ever, if there are any articles that you think would be relevant for us to talk about here on the podcast, send them our way. But until next time, thanks for listening. The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.